They called it staying power in a pill, but it was really just methamphetamine. By the time World War I erupted in 1914, war had become industrial, and so had the drugs that powered it. In this video, we're diving into the story of the forgotten stimulant that kept soldiers awake, fearless, and sometimes reckless. Imagine you're 20 years old, standing in a freezing trench, sleep deprived, starving, and surrounded by the thunder of constant shell fire. You haven't slept in days. Then your officer hands you a little white pill, and suddenly you're wide awake, sharp. This wasn't caffeine. This was one of the earliest mass uses of methamphetamine in modern warfare, and its effects terrifyingly effective. Let's rewind a bit. Methamphetamine was first synthesized in Japan in 1893, but it wasn't until 1919 that it was crystallized into a more potent, easy to use form. Meanwhile, in Germany, chemists were working on similar compounds to help fight fatigue, especially for pilots and infantrymen. By the start of World War I, pharmaceutical companies in Europe had already been experimenting with stimulants. Bayer, the same company that gave us aspirin and, quite frankly, and ironically, heroin, was exploring the commercial uses of powerful psychostimulants. Why was that? Because war required men to be machines. In the muddy fields of the Western Front, exhaustion was one of the biggest enemies. Soldiers went days without sleep, and their mental sharpness deteriorated. German officers began issuing small doses of methamphetamine to keep their men focused, alert, and aggressive. And it wasn't just Germany. The British Army also turned to stimulants. Though not as chemically potent as later versions of meth, soldiers were often issued benzodrine inhalers, an amphetamine-based stimulant toward the end of the war and into World War II. These drugs helped fuel the constant shelling, night raids, and grueling marches. Soldiers reported feeling more confident, less afraid, almost superhuman, but that came at a cost. While the short-term effects of meth were sharpness and stamina, the long-term impacts were horrifying. Soldiers began to suffer from paranoia, hallucinations, and violent mood swings. Some committed war crimes and drug-fueled frenzies. Others fell into deep depression or collapsed from nervous exhaustion. Methamphetamine didn't make you feel invincible, it just made you feel that way until your body and mind gave out. But militaries weren't worried about the long term, they wanted performance, and meth delivered that, for better or worse. The use of meth in World War I was a kind of prototype, but it set a dangerous precedent. By the time World War II rolled around, Nazi Germany had perfected its use. The drug Pervitin, a crystal meth tablet, was handed out by the millions to soldiers, tank crews, and even civilians. There are records of entire divisions staying awake for days on end. Hitler himself was reportedly given methamphetamine injections by his personal physician. This wasn't a one-off. This was military policy. World War I showed just how effective and destructive stimulants could be in warfare. It wasn't about health or safety, it was about efficiency. Soldiers were reduced to parts in a war machine, and drugs were the oil keeping them moving. Back home, these same drugs trickled into civilian life. Veterans came back addicted. Pharmaceutical companies began marketing stimulants for energy and mood. In the post-World War, it started running on speed. Today, methamphetamine is one of the most destructive illicit drugs on the planet. But its roots aren't just criminal, they're military. The buried drug that ravages communities today was once seen as a miracle weapon. It's a sobering reminder that even the most brutal tools can be born from desperation. That war, far from being just bullets and bombs, is also chemistry, psychology, and pharmaceutical manipulation. So the next time someone tells you World War I was fought in mud and trenches, remember, it was also fought in the brain.